We continue our player profiles. This time we focus on the rookie, Brandon Miller. What went right, what went wrong, and what's next? All today, Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and as always, that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. There's Doug Branson, as he always is. EveryHornetsBoxscore.com is where you can check out his Substack, and there you can also find his subtext information. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Sports Radio 92.7 FM. Brandon Miller, this is the one I think the people are excited about. Brandon Miller and his player profile, more so than LaMelo, even though that's probably the lead story of this season, him not being able to stay healthy. We didn't get to see those two in the backcourt together. But this is what went right, Doug, for the team. Brandon Miller, you hit on that second overall selection. Yeah, he's not as good as Wemby in the draft class, but he's second best. And if you draft the second best player in the draft class at number 2 overall, that's pretty damn good. And we'll take it, especially with a hot debate between another prospect that was right there that the Hornets could have taken second. It doesn't matter. He's not here anymore. He's in Portland. He's all the way on the other side of the country, all the way over there. Yeah, Brandon, what an incredible season he had for the Charlotte Hornets. Just to give you the stats real quickly, 17.3 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 2.4 assists. He shot 44% from the field, 37% from 3 on almost 7 attempts from distance per game. And just to round it all out here, 83% rounded up from the free throw line on over 2 free throw attempts per game. What went right, Doug? His whole season, to put it simple.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And he came in and made an immediate impact on a veteran head coach in Steve Clifford, who really just lapped praise on him from the jump. And that wasn't a given, because you remember two off seasons ago, he wasn't doing that with Mark Williams, another almost lottery pick. And you know, he eventually went down to the G League for a little while, but that praise wasn't immediate. For Brandon, it was just clear to the staff and to his fellow players that he understood the game on a level that was not a rookie level. It was a multi-year veteran level, and he displayed that. Not in Summer League. It took him a little bit to kind of shake off some of the jitters. But once we got into the regular season, it was bombs away. And then he was thrust because of injury into a starring role for this team, and he didn't shrink. And I mean, that's the concern with any rookie. I don't care who's praising who, but when you're thrown into that kind of role, I think there's a danger of the game just being too fast, and too complex for a rookie, and the body's too big. And certainly, you know, he's got to get stronger. There are areas of his game that are ripe for improvement, but he didn't shrink in the moment. And I've got one other thing to show you in my evaluation of what went right, and that's this trend line that I found on cleaningtheglass.com. And the trend line is for game score. And game score is one of these trying to catch all stats that wants to kind of compile everything and determine a player's impact on the game. And if I scroll down to the trend line here, you can see got off to a decent start, and then it dipped down for a little while until about mid-January, when things started to really take off for Brandon Miller. And he finished the season well above his position average in game score, and he really peaked, you know, in that post-trade deadline period. But the thing that I want you to take away from this trend line is that Brandon Miller made an impact on the game and got better at doing so as the season went on. And to me, that's a marker of a player that is headed for all NBA territory.
And as we've mentioned so many times, as the game went on, even if he was 1 of 5 in the first quarter, even if he was 3 of 9 in the first 3 quarters, in the fourth quarter, it felt like Brandon Miller was always ready for the moment, even if the shooting percentage wasn't good and the efficiency wasn't good leading up to it. And I think that speaks volumes of a guy that has a lot of confidence coming in. And I think we've seen that throughout a bunch of interviews that he's had coming in. The confidence does not wane whatsoever. Immediately, it showed up. And I think that's what we liked about him. The dog in him aspect, it's there with Brandon, and it was so immediate. We knew, oh, okay, he's not going to be scared of the moment whatsoever. And I think he showed that not only at the beginning of the season, but it got even stronger at the end of the season when you needed a couple of clutch buckets from him just to keep pace with the opposition and or beat the opposition. And Brandon was the go-to guy. Everybody had to focus in late game situations. Defenses focused more on Brandon as the threat they were worried about the most compared to a Miles Bridges, who was still a good player, even if there were some ups and downs this season. And there wasn't anybody else to focus on, but Brandon was the guy. And I think he would have earned that regardless of, you know, maybe a couple of stars would have taken that attention away from him, but they gave it to Brandon, and he even still delivered in some of those double team situations.
Totally. That's such a great point. And that goes back to what I said, didn't shrink in the moment. And when things got tougher on him, he got better. And he was, I think, the core of this team. If this team is going to have an identity, if it's going to have a toughness, if it's going to have a grit moving forward, the core of that is going to land solely on Brandon Miller. He is going to be that voice for the Charlotte Hornets. And he relished, as the season went on, he relished the opportunity to be a vocal leader on the court and in the locker room. And it seems because of his basketball acumen, because of what people are seeing in terms of his work ethic, in terms of his willingness to get back on the court, even when he had some minor injuries throughout the season, he has immediately earned the respect of a young team. And that's just like rookies don't typically do that. He is not a typical rookie. And I think that's the big takeaway in terms of like what went right. And look, there were concerns that we had for him coming into the league. One of those was shooting. You know, could he get his shot off? The release looked a little wonky. It looked a little slow. It looked a little out of place. And he immediately dispelled all of those concerns. He was able to get it up very quickly. Deep threes were going in for Brandon Miller throughout the season. I think he finished 2.5 made threes per game. That puts him like in the upper echelon of rookie seasons all time. That's super impressive. He was available pretty much all season long in a season that was essentially injury riddled. And Walker, I'm gonna put this out there too. Before the draft, there were obviously concerns because of his involvement in the situation in Alabama, and where there was a gun involved and a young woman was murdered, and there was so much concern that Charlotte sent a team of lawyers like John Grisham novel style down to Alabama to figure out what was going on, and they came away from that going, Brandon Miller's a good kid, was involved in a bad situation, wrong place, wrong time. But he's just a good kid. And in his rookie season, at least, no concerns there. Stayed out of trouble, was not in the headlines for any kind of negative reason, was a stand-up leader for this team. And so we have to put that in the bucket of what went right as well.
No, we often don't talk about it just because we should give more.
There's no reason.
Yeah, right, which is a beautiful thing. You're right about that. And just
for the Hornets particularly, right? For the Hornets particularly, that can't seem to avoid, and that was part of our concern too when drafting him, was like, hey, this is a team that has some bad PR issues, and you are bringing on a situation here that seems to be, I mean, he couldn't even talk pre-draft because everybody wanted to ask about this, court situation that I think may still be a thing, but it doesn't appear to be a Brandon Miller thing, and it wasn't a distraction for him or for the team.
Rapid fire observations from him this season. You're right about me being worried about his ability to get his shot off. He was crafty enough to pull off some fadeaways, mid-range game, three-point shot, quick enough release. All that was fine, and that was polarizing. I was in the wrong in the pre-draft evaluation there. Totally got the shot off. The handle, while it's not explosive getting to the rim, that's something we'll take a focus on in the third segment. it's still crafty enough. Some Chris Paul style, put you on the hip and put you in jail type style dribble and get his shot off there. You have to be crafty when you don't have the explosive lateral quickness to get right by your guy, but you have enough of a handle to where I totally trust you with the basketball in your hands in isolated dribble situations. I don't worry that you're going to turn it over in a terrible way. I do think the playmaking, it's there. There's a foundation. Perhaps the playmaking can be referenced here in what went right, and it can be referenced in the last segment, and we can get to that. And there are some different aspects to it. You had something on that, Doug?
Well, just to that point quickly, again, if you look at the trend line on cleaning the glass, his playmaking in terms of his assist percentage did improve. It improved from bad, from non-existent to somewhat below his position average. So and Miles Bridges brought this up. There is room for improvement in terms of his playmaking, but you can see the seeds of that being planted throughout the season.
Well, and I loved it. That was one thing I praised coming out of Alabama. I thought he was great. Actually probably didn't play make as much as I thought he would in his rookie season, but it's there. The foundation is still there. Defensively, help side blocks, just being a long nuisance on the perimeter.
Steal percentage went way up as the season went on.
That's all real. It can stay in front of his guy. A little tiny physicality destroys him. So
and quickness. Because right now he's stuck.
Stuff.
Right now he's stuck in this sort of 2-3 wonky zone. He's not strong enough to guard some things. He's not quick enough to go. I think those will get figured out as his body matures. I'm not like terribly concerned about that. But yeah, I mean, you can see again, there are all of these areas where he can improve, and in all of those areas, there are no clear red flags for me. There are just like, oh, I can see where, and then it comes down to Walker. Is he the kind of guy that is going to get into the laboratory every summer and improve one or two or three things? KD style, what Clifford said about KD when he was a member of the Nets coaching staff. He said watching KD, as good as he was every summer, got into the lab, got better. I just can't imagine that Brandon Miller's not that guy.
No, it's all there, right? And the mood, the personality, the ability to almost become this chameleon whenever you're needed with a positive attitude, being the clown in the locker room, but calling people out for not getting back on defense. He seems to mold in whatever you need him to do personality-wise, which is also great. Last thing, if we wanted to get to one thing we know is going to be like possibly elite because it's already so good, he can always go back to that safe zone, which is his shooting. The shooting's real. That was what everybody preached coming out. I thought he would still be a great shooter, but he proved that immediately, and we'll see exactly how far that goes, but that's something he can always go back to. That's what went right. Lots and lots of what went right for Brandon Miller. That was a fun segment. Maybe not so fun segments coming up a little bit later as we do player profiles, but today's a good one, folks. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll go with the season in review, take a break from Brandon before we get back to Brandon at the end of the show. But a season in review, and we're going to go to what Doug is calling a very different thing than the Sicko satchel.
It's different.
Sicko Sound Off?
Sicko Sound Off. It's different.
And it's coming up next, Locked On Hornets. Before we get to the Sicko Sound Off, the very different Sicko Sound Off, I want to tell you about DoorDash. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Moms are a gift, so give her the best this Mother's Day. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash, and you can select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to self-care essentials and more, delivered right to her door. Pair flowers with a gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants. If she's a bookworm, try a bookstore gift card. Does she love a good latte? Get a gift card to her favorite coffee shop. You can't go wrong with DoorDash. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place, and you can get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with Locked On NBA. That's Locked On NBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Plus, this episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Guys, I need you to listen to this huge announcement.
Okay.
You get the drill. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day. Mm-hmm. I've been keeping my eyes on the scores, putting all my heart into it. I hope you have as well. I'm super pumped to announce that I'm finally on top, Doug. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly, and you can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties. Just like Monopoly, you can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who is a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, Doug, I think the people are ready for the Sicko Sound Off because it's very different. Go ahead. Sicko Sound
That's right.
Off.
The satchel is when I ask sickos for questions and then put them into a satchel, and I reach into the satchel and I bring the questions out.
Okay.
The Sicko satchel is also when I have news and notes from around the league that have to do with the Hornets that I then also put into the satchel, and I reach in and I rummage and I grab something for the show. That is the Sicko satchel, okay? Sicko Sound Off is when we talk about a hot topic like J.J. Redick possibly being the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, and the sickos converge on the comments and they sound off, and some of them are really, really good, and I want to make sure that they get on the show. And really, to me, the comments on this, on Redick being the coach, fall into three categories. The first category is, I love this, please do this. The second category is, I hate this, please don't do this. And then the third category is Mark Jackson.
That has to be the next category. Anytime you're looking for a new coach, there's always the Mark Jackson category. That's
literally 49 minutes ago, someone commented, Antoine Austin, 9063, congrats, you're on the show. You commented, what about Mark Jackson, ? And to that, I would say, and to anyone who mentions Mark Jackson, you are not alone. You have been and hundreds, thousands of others have been asking this question ever since he got fired as head coach of the Golden State Warriors. The fact that he hasn't gotten another job despite your pleas, I think is the answer to your question. But that wasn't even my favorite Mark Jackson type of comment. That went to Adrian Gray 8393, who commented, Michael Jordan needs to go after these coaches for the Hornets job. Coach K, Phil Jackson, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, Jay Wright, Mike Budenholzer,
Wow.
Mark Jackson, John Thompson III, Dwayne Casey, and Sam Mitchell.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, the Mark Jackson thing, there's always the Mark Jackson category. We did this a couple of years ago. The Mark Jackson stuff. He deserves credit for building a foundation that led to a title the very next year with Steve Kerr.
Hockey assist.
There was the hockey assist, kind of, or just an outright basketball assist by passing it to Steve Kerr. But Mark Jackson did some nice things. There's also terrible communication from him and the authority figures within the organization at Golden State that they just weren't going to put up with anymore. And if you're an owner or if you are a general manager, you don't want to put up with that because of some of the countless stuff that was going on. Like here's a Joe Lacob comment, the owner of Golden State. You can't have 200 people in the organization not like you. He said that at a luncheon in 2014, referring to Mark Jackson. You can't. You know what? It's a good comment. You can't have that many people in the org not like you. And so, amongst other reasons, that's why Mark Jackson hasn't been able to get a head coaching job. I don't know how well he would do. I really don't. But I'm just telling you that's the reason why he hasn't gotten a job to this point.
I think the Hornets have to, not just with the head coaching position, but they have to in general do some reputation rebuilding around the league in terms of how much money they're spending on the team, practice facility, on the road type of facilities for players. But also the head coach, very important in your reputation. How is it to go play for the Charlotte Hornets? I think they do. Like typically for a young team, I would be on board with like, oh, we need some discipline. We need somebody to come down and like lay down the law. And there has to be some of that. But I think at the same time, you've got to have a guy that can come in and build the reputation back up a little bit so that if this team does find success in the next couple of years, it's going to be easier to recruit players to play for your team if you've got a head coach in place that people like. I mean, I think that's kind of important. So yeah, I'm totally with you on there. Let's get back to some of these comments. We've got INTJ saying, hate Duke, but Lord, please, we need someone that knows the game like JJ. Love for Jets mentions one more name here. Give Danny Hurley, head coach of UConn, an interview. Everybody always loves the championship head coach, but I don't think that guy's going anywhere. I think he wants to be a legend there in UConn. The Mouse 1NZ says, is Clifford's new position going to be as coach whisperer? Not go and find the right kind of guy, Czar, but coach whisperer to teaching JJ. We mentioned that connection, that Orlando connection. What do you think about that?
And it's funny that not many other people are mentioning it, but it's exactly who he played for as soon as he stepped foot into the league. We know that Steve Clifford is a part of the coaching search process. He's been talking to some of the coaches that have been brought in for interviews. We learned that at his end of season presser. So I believe Steve Clifford probably has talked to JJ. I would think that. And I would say, yeah, maybe there is going to be some form of communication. I don't know if that's going to be one of his responsibilities, but I'm sure they're going to be talking if that's the case.
This one's good. Basketball Sicko in the name. So we got to do a little Sicko sound off with the Sicko in the name. Says, hire JJ Redick as head coach for leadership and game philosophy. Hire a top assistant coach who had coaching experience for X's and O's. And then hire another assistant as offensive defensive coordinator specialist. For reference, Doc Rivers had Tibbs and Allman Hill in his first season in Boston. Ty Lue's first season with the Cavs, he had Jim Boylan and Larry Drew as assistants. Steve Kerr had Alvin Gentry, Ron Adams when he first got to the Warriors. Yeah. So to me, this is the point. And but you have to connect that point to ownership's willingness to open the wallet.
Yep.
To start writing the checks, because that costs
all that
money, but they can control that. There's no cap on coach spending, so they can totally control that. And I think if they're going to go with any of these young coaches that have been named, not just JJ, especially JJ, but not just JJ, then you've got to fill that bench with with some like associate head coaching experience, maybe with the exception, I guess, of Lee. Like I feel like Lee has been on championship level benches where I'm not as worried about. But any of these other young hires that they're thinking about, got to have experience on the bench.
But you'd even still like it, right? Yeah, same page, same sentence, all of it. Totally agree. And I like that point because it reminds me also, I've been making a lot of NFL parallels. I've been doing a lot of NFL coaching radio lately, coaching search radio. It is. I've been doing a lot of that as well. But it reminds me of Sean McVay not hiring Wade Phillips, not just like, oh, okay, I'll just go hire a former head coach that's also one of the more praised defensive coordinators, but begging Wade Phillips to be on his coaching staff. And then eventually that's the 33-year-old taking over as a head coach in the NFL, but having somebody as his top assistant and defensive coordinator that has been so experienced and been a head coach before. Totally agree with all that. Also, even a Mike D'Antoni, when we wanted him as a possible head coach, 50 wins, that was a big thing on Locked On Hornets. We all remember the huge turnaround defensively that Houston had when D'Antoni was there, and a lot of that credit went to Jeff Bezdelik as the defensive coordinator for Houston, and we were like, hey, maybe he could bring him to the Hornets as well. Yeah, strong staff, would love it. If JJ was the coach especially, you're right, but really any of these assistant coaches, I would welcome a strong staff.
When Kevin Young, who was one of the candidates who ended up going to BYU to be their head coach, he was the sort of offensive coordinator for Phoenix, although that's struggling right now. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, though. There's a danger in that, though, because you are, in some sense, especially with these top candidates, trying to convince them in some sense to take on your project. The Hornets are a project. They're not exactly, they've got young players that would be exciting. There's a foundation there. I don't think it's as hard a sell as it used to be, but you still, I think, will have to sell these coaches on this opportunity somewhat. And so if you start demanding, well, you got to hire this guy and you got to hire that guy, then it starts to get a little, there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room. You got to wiggle a little bit and figure out what that balance is if you want a certain name. But it'll be interesting to check out. And
last example on that real quickly, when Borrego had Jay Triano, that was welcomed. That was a big time addition for them. So if it's not like we haven't done it in some way before, the rest of the staff, when we kind of undid all the good grace once we told Kenny Atkinson he couldn't have his coaching staff, and then kept the same one for Steve Clifford. But we at least tried it. Like hey, Triano coming over with James Borrego. We did have a pretty top assistant on the staff before with a young head coach.
All right, so I was going to get to a mock draft in this segment and keep my promise of one mock draft every day until the draft. I still want to keep that promise, so I would like to do my mock draft after this.
You heard the man. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Not much of a tease. You know what's coming up, but even still, you don't know what kind of mock draft is coming up. So who is going to be that selection? Plus, then, yes, we'll dabble into a little bit of the negative with Brandon Miller, but not so negative that he can't fix it. All of that coming up next. Locked On Hornets. Before we get to that, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, and baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I might be really feeling about something. You might want to say how you are really feeling about something, and it's this feeling you get every single week. Maybe it pops up every now and then, and you don't know how quite to shake it or share it. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get those things off of your chest every once in a while. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. So visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets ahead.
Walker, you were talking about our friends at FanDuel, and so I was curious if they had any odds on the head coach position, and I haven't found those yet. But what I did find were some NBA draft betting odds, and they have them on who will select Bronny James in the 2024
seen this.
NBA draft. And now the Hornets are tied for the longest odds with Detroit, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Utah, Washington, and Indiana at plus 5,000. Now, I'm no betting sage, but I'm just gonna throw some things out there, okay? The Hornets have new owners. Those new owners so far have played it safe, very responsible. And at the trade deadline, they got I think they've got a lot of street cred now in terms of the fan base. I think the fan base they have a lot of capital to spend with the fan base after pulling off some of the first round pick heists and player heists that they got from Oklahoma City and from Dallas. And so I think we're waiting for that opportunity for this ownership group to do something exciting, to do something crazy, to zig when everyone else is zagging.
There it is.
And folks, I think this could be it because they've got a high second round pick. They've got some assets if they wanted to trade up a few picks into the late first round. Bronny James plus 5,000. I might put that bet in.
Well, Bet the Buzz has gone so well for us this year. You might as well.
You gotta bet the Buzz.
Bet the Bronny. I don't know
I
don't know if that's going to go as well. But maybe you've been warning the people to zig while everybody is zagging. And so maybe that is something you can do and bet at your own risk. You want to get to your mock draft before we move on to some of the what went wrong with Brandon?
Yeah, I will. I think it has to come, right? Because typically we don't see this where new owners come in and everything has been played safe. They won't even fire anyone. Everyone that gets fired just gets moved to a new office down the hall. Like nothing. I'm waiting for them to swing their bat.
Well, it's new owner syndrome is what you're looking for. We haven't seen symptoms of that. And I think maybe what be different here is with guys like Rick Schnall and Gabe Plotkin, you have somebody in Rick Schnall who's already done the NBA thing before. This is not something completely new to him. I guess I don't know specifically or remember what Ishbia's background was, but Matt Ishbia is
in like real estate.
Well, yeah, I don't think he was a minority owner or anything like that.
No.
I think with him,
the business guy.
We're trading for KD. Let's go after it. Everybody has this new owner syndrome move, but Rick Schnall's already been a part of something, so he kind of understands maybe the not so sexy moves that help your basketball team. It's just not in such a readily apparent way. And if Gabe Plotkin is getting talked down, maybe I like this idea of Schnall and Plotkin fighting about what to do. Plotkin's like, hey, let's go get Bronny. And Rick is, well, simmer down, young whippersnapper. It's not time. We'll make our move. It's just not time right now.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, Matt Ishbia didn't have new owner syndrome. He had like actual rich guy syndrome, which is the same syndrome that Steve Ballmer has, which is like, I'm actually rich. Like, you think you're rich, I'm actually rich.
Well, and then Ballmer looks, there's levels, and then Ballmer is at the top of the pyramid because
right.
You're right. There's not.
Well, and Ishbia had that kind of wealth too. So they don't.
Yeah.
Like Plotkin and Schnall have money. They're wealthy, but they ain't that kind of rich. And
or else they wouldn't be owning together. Like, this is why they're owning together, because they both needed each other's money.
Right. And so to me, they're acting like money managers. They're not being cheap, but they're acting responsibly. Because look, when you're talking about sort of investing in funds, you can invest all kinds of ways and on the spectrum between conservative and aggressive. And right now, they're like playing it right down the middle. And I'm waiting on that. Are you going to, throw something at a tech stock? Buy some crypto? Get crazy. That's what I'm waiting on. We'll see. All right, mock draft. I got to do this before I break my promise. CBSSports.com. They've got the Hornets in the third position in this draft. After the tiebreaker, they now have them in the third position. Number 1 pick, Alex Sarr. Number 2, Zachary. Let me get the pronunciation.
Is it Risner
I looked this
Reisner?
up.
Yeah, or something
I looked
like
this
that.
up.
Okay.
Because he's French, and it always gets tricky with the French names.
That's true.
This is Zachary Risache is number 2 overall, although Gavoni did this Gavoni on ESPN did this write-up on how Risache was going into the draft, and it started out with projected number 1 pick, Zachary Risache, and I'm like, Gavoni, come on, man.
Oh, he's
Phony?
terrible this season. He's always been bad. God. He's always been bad, but this offseason, or this whole college basketball season, as we approach the draft, everybody is reaching their ceiling. It's top 14 pick, Zach Edey. Top 5 pick, Donovan Clingan. Like, everybody, I'm pretty sure at this point we have 20 people going in the top 15. There's just no wiggle room with some of these prospects, and that's what the problem is. And so if Jonathan Gavoni fixes that, then he can give us all the high ceiling comps or whatever.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. No one. I have not seen a single mock draft where Risache has been number 1. Now, maybe he sneaks there. Maybe he grows into that. But I have not seen a single one that doesn't have Sarr up top in the early going. All right, number 3. Drum roll, please. It is Stefan Castle out of UConn, the point guard, in the third position. Let's see, who did this? Let me give some credit here. This is Kyle Boone. Writes, Castle earned a ton of fans in NBA circles this season, embracing his complimentary role for a 37-win UConn team that won the national title. He embraced his role as a lockdown defender and was able to turn it up a level on offense when necessary. Lots of untapped potential here for a big guard with a big game. And there's a lot of fun to be had in a LaMelo Ball, Stephon Castle, Brandon Miller backcourt. Gimme! Exclamation point.
He's going to be the favorite. Stephon Castle is going to be the name we probably talk about more than any, depending on where they're going to select. And there's going to be other names that pop up, and they'll be the soup of the week for whatever. But yeah, I think Stephon Castle is going to be this guy that we mentioned quite a bit. And it makes sense.
And I think, to me, just in my early evaluation of this, it's all going to come down to whether you can ignore the 26.7% three-point shot and the shot in general. Can you buy into that improving enough not to make him a benchable liability? Liability. Why did I have trouble with liability?
I don't know.
Maybe because I lie so much. So that's the thing. Can you ignore that? Or maybe he has to have one of these sort of like personal workouts where we just see him drop 3-point shot after 3-point shot, and you go,
the
okay.
James Bouknight workout.
Oh God! Now you're
right. What could go wrong? No, just get somebody that's making a bunch of threes with nobody guarding you. Yeah. Just the James Bouknight. Well, at least it's funny because then Bouknight actually falls, and there the Hornets are to select him. All right, you want to do some what went wrong with Brandon Miller? Yep. What he needs to work on? Let's do it. First thing I noticed here, tweet. So everything we discussed coming into his rookie season was finishing at the rim. How was that going to translate? Was he going to be better at it? He actually wasn't terrible at finishing at the rim. He was in like the 48th, 50th percentile according to Cleaning the Glass. He just doesn't get there, Doug. That's the problem. And he gets there way below average for his position. If you are a big wing, which is what I think most people would tell you is the most valuable archetype in the NBA, a lot of the good that comes from that is the ability to have the athleticism to get to the rack and then finish once you get there. And he was okay at finishing, but he didn't get there at all. Like the only reason he got there would be if he cut backdoor, which are smart plays, right? Smart off-ball plays where people would feed him cutting backdoor. If he did have a full steam ahead, then he would dunk on you. Like he's not soft at all. That is not a part of his game. He just doesn't have the explosiveness right now to get by his defender and then go all the way to the rack. The 2-point percentage, that has to go way up. I mean, he was 33 percentile in 2-point percentage. That's not good, and that's something that needs to be fixed. So finishing at the rack is okay. Taking a lot more shots at the rim is something we need to see an improvement on, and actually shooting better overall from 2-point land, which I think that's where the mid-range comes in, Doug. Even if you're good at mid-range, it's going to hurt you compared to other people at your position when you just don't get to the basket, and that's where Brandon is right now.
Yeah, certainly his activity at the rim has to increase. So in that way, it has to improve. But I don't know that I would put it in the what went wrong category. I would actually put that in the what went right category because I think it shows that Brandon Miller understood who he was. He probably also understands who he will be at some point, but he understands who he was in this rookie season, and he played to his strengths and didn't try to show, hey, I'm Paul George right now. Hey, I'm Jason Tatum right now. So actually, I think that's in what went right.
Maybe maybe what's next, because it's certainly not good, but maybe we can talk about it. This is something that we would like to see improve, and the fact that you were able to be so good without it, that is good. You're right, but we'd like to see that improve. I think that's without question.
Yeah, for sure. I can't point to really anything other than just like. Sometimes his general when his scoring wasn't there, he disappeared in the game. And now this improved as the season went on, as I mentioned with that game score trend line. Like he was doing his rebounding got a lot better towards the end of the season. He was stealing the basketball a lot more. But there were certainly games where if he wasn't knocking down, 3 or 4 3-pointers, his impact on the game wasn't as noticeable. Now, that's to me, that's all going to improve as he gets better, as he gets savvier, and as better players are around him. You know what I mean? So many things that we've mentioned so far, you can trace back to, well, yeah, like this wasn't supposed to be his role. He wasn't supposed to be the offensive focus of the team. That was supposed to be LaMelo Ball. That was supposed to be, in some respects, Miles Bridges. And so, yeah, if the team improves along with him, it's going to make his job a lot easier.
For sure. The foul drawing, I don't even put, he didn't draw a lot of fouls. I know that's something Kevin Pelton mentioned when he and Bobby Marks were going back and forth as to why Brandon was 5th or whatever. But I think that has a lot to do with offensive responsibility, role within the offense. We'll see, right? There's certainly a decent amount that Brandon is at fault for here, but we've seen our fair share of rookies in Charlotte, Doug, not be great foul drawers for sure. So Brandon, I don't really worry about that too much. One thing I have no problem putting in the what went wrong category and what's next, if we want to meet in the middle of that Venn diagram, way too many possessions where there just wasn't a lot of resistance with his guy getting to the rim and shooting pretty easily over him despite having a long wingspan, just because he keeps falling back. And I think it's because he might be afraid to get in foul trouble. Maybe that's because he was so valuable that Steve Clifford Clifford possibly coached him to not go contest as much and not foul with the body. Maybe that's true, but lots and lots of possessions where there wasn't a lot of resistance with guys just driving to the rack and being able to finish with him around.
I totally agree, but I'll just repeat. I think it was a little James Harden-esque, where you're going, okay, this guy is so important. He knows it. The coaches know it. This guy is so important to us, even having a 5% chance of winning this game. This guy cannot be in foul trouble. And to me, that's a strength of Brandon Miller, that he understands that, and that I'm sure there's a desire on his part. You could see it in certain matchups late in games. Like, he turned it up. He doesn't want to get busted off the dribble. It doesn't seem like that's a thing that he likes.
I hope not.
And what I mean by that is, like, some players are okay with it. And I don't think anybody loves it, but there are certain players that are okay with it. I don't think he's okay with it. It's just he understood the assignment. And so that's what we have to pay attention to. When the assignment changes, does his game change? I tend to think yes, it will.
Mark Williams being out, I also think probably exposes him a little more there.
Yeah.
Nick Richards not coming over. I think with Steve Clifford Steve Clifford especially, he's not going to be the head coach.
Center. It is crazy. And again, anyone who listens to this "What Went Wrong" segment is going to say, "Guys, injuries." No, we get it. We get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the story.
Right. There are some stuff to improve on. Like, that's fair. But you're right. There's a reason we just talked about how this is the good episode. There's plenty of what went right. And I said simply what went right was his entire rookie season. That's what went right for Brandon. And perhaps that's what we dismount with. It's Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, and that includes YouTube. Go check out Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. There you can get a subtext information, and you can also listen to me on the radio, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. via Wes and Walker. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.